Before I tell you what my daughter sent me that morning, I need you to understand something. At 68 years old, I thought I had learned every lesson life could throw at a woman. I had buried a husband, paid off a mortgage, raised 2 children on my own after cancer took their father. But the lesson I learned the week before my daughter's wedding was the one that nearly destroyed me. In this story, you'll see why love without boundaries can become a weapon, why financial independence must never be compromised, and why sometimes the people we protect the most are the ones who hurt us the deepest. My name is Margaret Collins. I live in Ohio, and 3 months ago, my daughter told me not to come to her wedding. It happened on a Tuesday morning. I was sitting on my beige living room sofa, the same one Harold and I bought 20 years ago. The sun was coming through the lace curtains. I had just poured my second cup of coffee. Then my phone buzzed. I smiled when I saw her name, Emily. I thought maybe she was sending me a picture of the wedding dress. Instead, I read, "Don't you dare come to my wedding. Jason doesn't want you there. You're embarrassing me." I stared at the screen. At first, I thought it was a mistake. I typed back, "Sweetheart, what do you mean?" 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, "If you show up, security will remove you." Security? For a moment, I couldn't breathe. This was the little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, the one who cried when I left her at kindergarten, the one who told me at 16, "Mom, you're my best friend." And now, I was a threat? I set my phone down. My hands were shaking. I told myself there must be a reason. There had to be. Because mothers do not raise daughters who exile them from weddings for no reason, right? It hadn't always been this way. After Harold died 5 years ago, Emily became protective of me. Too protective, maybe. She started handling my online banking. "Mom, you don't need to stress about bills." She insisted I add her name to my checking account, just in case something happens. At the time, it felt loving, responsible. I trusted her. She was my daughter. Then she met Jason. Tall, polished, always smiling. But his eyes never smiled. From the first dinner at my house, I felt it. He spoke for her, corrected her. Once, when she laughed too loudly, he placed his hand on her knee, hard enough that she flinched. I noticed, but I said nothing, because I didn't want to be that mother-in-law. When they announced their engagement, I wrote them a check for $25,000. It was from Harold's life insurance. "For the wedding," I said. Jason hugged me tightly, too tightly. The wedding planning moved fast, too fast. Venues booked, caterers hired, designer dress purchased. Every time I asked a question, Emily seemed irritated. "Mom, we've got it handled." One afternoon, I logged into my bank account to check my retirement deposit, and that's when I saw it. 3 withdrawals, $18,000, $7,500, $9,200, all labeled Transfer Authorized User. My stomach dropped. Authorized user? Emily. I called her immediately. "Sweetheart, I think there's been a mistake." Silence. Then, "Oh, that. Jason said since you already gave us money, we assumed you'd want to help more." Assumed. Without asking me. Without telling me. I felt something shift inside my chest. Not anger, not yet. Something colder. I drove to her apartment that evening. Jason answered the door. He didn't invite me in. Emily's resting. I need to speak with my daughter. His smile tightened. You need to trust her choices, Margaret. Trust? I walked past him into the living room. Emily stood up quickly. Mom, you're overreacting. Overreacting? I whispered. That money is my retirement. She crossed her arms. You're being selfish. Selfish? After everything. That night I lay awake replaying the word, selfish. By morning I had convinced myself I would apologize, because that's what mothers do. We smooth things over, we sacrifice, we stay quiet. So I texted her, I'm sorry if I upset you, I just want to understand. That's when she sent the message, the one about security, the one that shattered something in me. But here's what I didn't know. That message wasn't written in anger. It wasn't written in emotion. It was written after a conversation I wasn't meant to hear. A conversation about my house, about my will, about how much longer I might live. If this story resonates with you, stay with me, because what I uncovered next was far worse than a wedding invitation.
2 days after that message, I drove to my bank. Not because I was brave, not because I wanted confrontation, but because something in my chest wouldn't settle. It felt like when Harold was sick, and I knew before the doctors said it out loud that something was wrong. You know that feeling, when your body understands before your mind does. The sky was gray that morning. Ohio winters always feel heavier when your heart is unsettled. I parked in the same spot I've parked in for 15 years, walked through the same glass doors, smiled at the same receptionist. Good morning, Mrs. Collins. Her voice was warm, familiar, safe. For a moment, I almost turned around. I almost convinced myself I was being dramatic. But then I remembered the word, selfish, and I walked to the counter. I'd like to speak with Mr. Reynolds, I said. He had been my bank manager for over a decade. He helped Harold refinance the house during chemo treatments. He knew our history. When I sat down in his office, he didn't smile. That was the first sign. Margaret, he said slowly, I was actually planning to call you. My stomach dropped. I need to ask about the recent transfers, I said carefully. He opened my file, scrolled, paused. Then he looked at me in a way I will never forget. It wasn't suspicion. It wasn't judgment. It was concern. Margaret, he said slowly, did you authorize a restructuring request on your home? My mind went blank. A what? He turned his monitor slightly toward me. There it was, a digital application. Home Equity Access Adjustment, submitted online. Electronic signature attached. My name, but it wasn't my handwriting. I did not sign that, I whispered. The room suddenly felt too small, too bright. Mr. Reynolds leaned back in his chair. Your daughter is listed as joint account holder and secondary financial contact. The request came from her device. My ears rang. Secondary financial contact? I remembered the afternoon she insisted we organize paperwork. She had said it was just for emergencies. I trusted her, because she was my daughter. What does the restructuring do? I asked. He hesitated. It would convert a portion of your home's equity into accessible funds.
How much? He looked down at the screen again. $280,000. I felt like I was falling backward. My house. Harold and I bought that house in 1987. We planted the maple tree in the front yard ourselves. We paid it off 2 years before he died. That house wasn't just property, it was history, and someone was trying to turn it into cash without telling me. I want everything frozen, I said quietly. Mr. Reynolds nodded immediately. We can initiate a fraud review. Fraud. The word echoed. I never imagined I would sit in a bank office discussing fraud involving my own child. As he printed documents, my hands wouldn't stop shaking. There's something else, he said carefully. There have been inquiries about your will. My will? Yes, someone contacted our estate liaison asking about asset distribution timelines. Timelines. I knew exactly what that meant. How long until I die? I drove home in silence, the radio off, phone face down on the passenger seat. Every red light felt like an eternity. I replayed every conversation from the last 6 months. Every time Jason asked, "Have you thought about downsizing? Big houses are hard to maintain at your age. At least let Emily manage the paperwork. At your age. I'm 68, not incompetent, not fragile, but suddenly I felt very old. When I got home, I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened Harold's old filing cabinet, the one in the hallway closet. I pulled out my original will, my trust documents, my property deed. Everything was exactly where I left it, but something told me that wasn't the point. This wasn't about paperwork, this was about control, about access, about positioning. And then I remembered something small. 3 weeks ago, Emily had insisted on scanning updated copies of my documents for safekeeping. I had handed them over, without hesitation, without thinking, because that's what mothers do. We believe our children are protecting us. I sat on my sofa, the same beige sofa from Tuesday, and stared at the wall. The silence in the house felt different now, heavier, like the walls were listening. That evening, my phone rang. Emily. For a moment, I almost didn't answer, but I did. Her voice was sharp. Why did the bank freeze everything? So she knew. I needed clarity, I replied calmly. You embarrassed us. Jason is furious. Jason is furious. Not, are you okay? Not, why didn't you call me? Jason is furious. Emily, I said slowly, did you attempt to access equity from my home? Silence. Then, it's for the future. Whose future? Yours or mine? I asked. You don't need that big house, and honestly, Mom, we're struggling. Weddings are expensive. Starting a life is expensive. Struggling. With designer invitations? With imported flowers? With a 5-star venue? You already took money without asking. That was a misunderstanding. No, Emily, that was a decision. Her breathing changed. I could hear frustration turning into anger. You always make everything about yourself. There it was again. Selfish. I realized something in that moment. This wasn't impulsive, this was calculated, and Jason was guiding it. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't call anyone. Instead, I did something I never thought I would do. I called an attorney. Her name was Linda Carver, estate specialist, recommended years ago by a friend. When she answered, her voice was calm, professional, grounded. I think my daughter is trying to access my assets, I said plainly. She didn't sound shocked, she sounded experienced. Come in tomorrow, she said. The next morning, sitting across from Linda's polished wooden desk, I told her everything. The transfers, the restructuring, the will inquiries, the wedding message. She listened without interrupting. When she finished, she folded her hands. Margaret, this is called financial grooming. The term hit me hard. Grooming? Yes, gradual access, gradual normalization of control. It often begins with helping. Helping. The word tasted bitter now. What can I do? I asked. Linda leaned forward slightly. You can revoke joint access immediately. I already froze the account. Good. Next, we adjust your estate structure. My heart pounded. Adjust? You mean remove her? Linda didn't soften it. Yes. The room felt very quiet. For 68 years, every decision I made centered around protecting my children. And now I was sitting in an office discussing protecting myself from one of them. Before you decide, Linda added gently, you need to understand something. If this continues, they could attempt conservatorship. I felt ice run through my veins. Conservatorship? They could argue diminished capacity, claim you're unable to manage finances. I thought about the petition inquiry, the restructuring attempt, the urgency around my age. This wasn't about wedding stress. This was about positioning. Positioning me as incapable, positioning themselves as necessary. That night, alone in my house, I finally allowed myself to cry. Not because of the money, not because of the house, but because I realized something far more painful. My daughter no longer saw me as her mother. She saw me as an asset. And in part 3,
It was 9:17 p.m. when someone knocked on my front door. I remember the exact time because I had just glanced at the clock above the television. I wasn't watching anything. The TV was on, but my mind wasn't. I hadn't slept properly in days, ever since the bank meeting, ever since the word conservatorship. The knock startled me. It wasn't aggressive, not impatient, just firm. I walked slowly toward the door, my heart thudding in a way I hadn't felt since Harold's diagnosis. Through the small side window, I saw Mrs. Patterson from across the street. Relief washed over me. She was in her early 70s, widowed, observant, the kind of neighbor who noticed everything but rarely interfered. I opened the door. Her face wasn't casual. It was tight, concerned. "Margaret," she said quietly, "I need to tell you something, and I'm not sure how." My stomach dropped. "Come in." We sat at my dining table, the same oak table Emily did her homework on 25 years ago. Mrs. Patterson folded her hands carefully. "I wasn't going to say anything," she began, "but after seeing what I saw this afternoon, I felt you deserved to know." My chest tightened. "What did you see?" She inhaled slowly. "I was driving back from the pharmacy around 3. I saw Jason's car parked outside your house." I frowned. "He didn't come inside." "I know," she said softly, "because you weren't home. Your car wasn't here." Cold air seemed to move through my body. "He was sitting inside the car, on his phone, for a long time." My mind raced. "I assumed he was waiting for you," she continued, "but then I noticed something else.
What? He got out, walked around your property, took pictures. Pictures. Of my house, of my windows, of my backyard fence. Are you sure? I asked quietly. She nodded. I didn't think much of it at first, but then I saw him try your side gate. My heart began pounding. He didn't get in, she quickly added, but he tried. I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't wedding stress. This wasn't misunderstanding. This was surveillance. After she left, I locked every door, every window. I pulled the curtains closed, and for the first time in my life, I felt unsafe inside my own home. I replayed the bank conversation, the restructuring attempt, the will inquiry, the conservatorship warning, and now, photos of my property. Why would someone preparing for marriage need pictures of my house? Unless it was documentation. Documentation for court. Proof of decline. Proof of neglect. Proof that I was unable to manage my property. My breathing grew shallow. I picked up my phone, opened my messages, scrolled back to something Jason had sent 2 months ago. Hey, Margaret, can you send me updated photos of the basement? Just curious about storage. I had ignored it, thought it was random. Now it wasn't random. It was a pattern. The next morning, I drove to Linda's office again. This time, I didn't feel confused. I felt focused. When I told her about the property photos, her expression didn't change. That scared me more. This escalates things, she said calmly. How? If someone is preparing a conservatorship case, they gather documentation, evidence, photos, statements, financial history. I swallowed. You think they're planning to declare me incompetent? She didn't answer directly. I think we need to move quickly. For the first time, I felt something other than sadness. I felt anger. Not explosive anger, not loud anger. Cold anger, the kind that settles into your bones. Linda began explaining options: trust restructuring, medical competency documentation, power of attorney revocation, asset protection transfer. Each term sounded clinical, strategic, necessary. This isn't just about stopping them, she said carefully. It's about protecting you long term. I nodded slowly. Do it. The words surprised even me. Everything that protects me. That afternoon, I made another decision, one I should have made earlier. I called Emily. She answered on the 3rd ring. What now? She sighed. Not hello, not Mom. What now? I need to ask you something directly, I said calmly. Silence. Why was Jason outside my house yesterday taking pictures? The silence stretched longer this time. Then, he was just curious. Curious about what? You're being paranoid. There it was. Gaslighting. I recognized it instantly now. I spoke to the bank, I continued evenly, and to an attorney. Her breathing shifted. What you? I know about the equity request, I know about the will inquiries, and I know about the conservatorship option. Silence. But this silence was different, not defensive, calculating. You don't understand how complicated finances are at your age. At your age, again. I understand enough to know I didn't authorize anything. You're overreacting. No, Emily, I'm protecting myself. The line went dead. She hung up. For several minutes, I just stood there holding the phone. Something inside me finally snapped. not in panic, in clarity. This wasn't manipulation by accident. This was coordinated, planned, step by step, gradual, exactly like Linda described, financial grooming. And then the final piece fell into place. I remembered something from 2 weeks ago. At dinner, Jason had casually asked, "Margaret, have you ever been evaluated for cognitive decline?" At the time, I laughed, thought it was an awkward joke. Now it wasn't funny. It was preparation. That night, I couldn't sit still. I walked through every room of my house, touched the walls, the photographs, the staircase railing Harold installed himself. They weren't just trying to take money, they were trying to take control of my life, my autonomy, my identity. And suddenly the wedding message made sense. If I showed up, if I confronted them publicly, if I disrupted their narrative, it would ruin their concerned daughter caring for aging mother storyline. I wasn't being excluded because I embarrassed them. I was being excluded because I was inconvenient. 2 days later, something arrived in my mailbox. Certified mail. My name typed formally. Inside was a notice. Preliminary intent to petition guardianship review. My hands went cold. It wasn't filed yet, but it was drafted. Drafted in Jason's handwriting, with Emily listed as petitioner. I sat down slowly. My own daughter, preparing to legally declare me incapable so she could gain full control of everything. And that's when something changed permanently inside me. The sadness began to fade. The confusion disappeared. In its place was something steady, unshakable. Resolve. Because if they wanted a legal battle, they were about to discover that I wasn't the fragile old woman they thought I was. Stay with me, because the power shift is about to begin.
I didn't panic when the certified notice arrived. That surprised even me. 3 days earlier, I would have broken down. 3 days earlier, I would have begged my daughter to talk to me. But something had changed. When you realize someone is quietly planning to take control of your life, something inside you hardens. Not cruel, not bitter, just clear. I drove straight to Linda's office. This time, I didn't tremble when I handed her the envelope. She read the preliminary guardianship draft slowly. Then she looked up. They moved faster than I expected. "I think they won't fight," I said calmly. Linda gave a small nod. "They're assuming emotional leverage." That was exactly it. They thought guilt would silence me. They thought motherhood would weaken me. They thought I would choose harmony over survival. They were wrong. "Here's what we're going to do," Linda said, sliding a yellow legal pad toward her. She began listing steps. 1. Immediate revocation of joint financial access. 2. Formal competency evaluation by independent physician. 3. Restructuring of estate trust. 4. Temporary asset freeze under attorney supervision. 5. Cease and desist regarding property interference. Each word felt like armor being placed around me. "Will this stop them?" I asked. "It will make it very difficult," she replied. "Good." Then I said something I never imagined I would say. "Remove her as beneficiary." Linda paused. "You're sure?" I inhaled slowly. I thought about the maple tree Harold planted, the hospital bills we survived, the nights I stayed up sewing Halloween costumes, the college tuition checks, the wedding contribution, the unauthorized transfers, the conservatorship draft, the word selfish. "Yes," I said quietly, "I'm sure." That afternoon, I sat in a sterile medical office for a cognitive evaluation.
I felt insulted, humiliated, but also determined. If they wanted to question my mind, I would give them proof they couldn't dispute. The doctor ran memory tests, reasoning exercises, financial comprehension questions. When he finished, he smiled. "Margaret, you are cognitively sharper than most patients 20 years younger." I nearly laughed. I requested a written certification on official letterhead, signed, stamped, documented. If they wanted a battle of paperwork, I would not lose. 3 days later, Linda filed a formal notice of asset restructuring. Emily received it the same afternoon. I know because she called within an hour. Her voice was shaking. "What did you do?" I protected myself. "You removed me?" "You tried to remove me first." Silence. Then Jason's voice in the background, angry, whispering. "What is he saying?" I asked calmly. "You've made a mistake," she snapped. "No, I corrected one. You're destroying this family." "No, Emily, I'm preventing it from being destroyed." The line went dead again, but this time I didn't feel small. I felt steady. 2 days later, something unexpected happened. Jason showed up at my house. Not in his car, on foot. He rang the bell repeatedly. I watched from the window, didn't open it. He finally shouted, "This is unnecessary, Margaret." I opened the window slightly. "You tried to declare me incompetent." He stiffened. "We were concerned." Concerned people don't transfer $280,000 without consent. His jaw tightened. "You don't understand modern financial planning." "I understand theft." That was the first time I used the word out loud. The air between us changed. "You'll regret this," he muttered. "No, you will." And I closed the window. That night, Linda called. "There's more." My chest tightened slightly. "They've withdrawn the guardianship draft." I exhaled slowly. They know they won't win. But then she added something unexpected. "They're also facing scrutiny for the unauthorized transfer requests." "Scrutiny?" she asked. "The bank flagged irregular authorization behavior. There may be an internal investigation." I felt no satisfaction, no gloating, just quiet clarity. Actions have consequences. A week later, I received another call, this time from Emily. Her voice sounded different, not angry, not defensive, afraid. "Jason's business accounts are frozen." I said nothing. "He's blaming me." Silence. "They're asking questions about the wedding payments." I finally spoke. "You mean the money you took without asking?" She began to cry. Real tears. Not frustration, not rage. Fear. "I didn't think it would go this far." Neither did I. But once you open certain doors, you cannot control what walks through them. "Why, Emily?" I asked softly. There was a long pause. Then the truth. "Jason said you were sitting on money that would eventually be ours anyway." The sentence felt like ice water down my spine. Ours anyway. Not mine, not earned, pre-claimed. "You believed him?" I thought we deserved help." "Help is requested, not taken." She sobbed quietly. For the first time in weeks, I heard my daughter again, not the defensive stranger, just a confused woman who let someone else steer her morality. But here's the thing about consequences. They don't reverse easily. The wedding date came and went. I didn't attend, not because I wasn't invited, but because something inside me had shifted permanently. You can forgive, but you cannot unlearn what someone is capable of. A week after the wedding, I did something unexpected. I transferred ownership of my house into a protected living trust. Irrevocable. Not for punishment, for protection. If I ever choose to give, it will be by decision, not manipulation. One afternoon, I sat on my beige sofa again. Sunlight through lace curtains. Same house, same quiet, but I felt different. stronger, clearer, and for the first time since the message about security, I felt safe again. But there was still one final conversation left, and in part 5, I'll tell you what happened when my daughter came back to my front door alone, without Jason. Lessons so far. 1. Documentation is power. 2. Emotional manipulation loses strength when met with legal clarity. 3. Protecting yourself is not betrayal, it is wisdom. If someone tries to take control of your life through guilt, remember this: silence protects abusers, strategy protects you. Stay with me, because the final chapter is not about revenge. It's about choice.
It was a quiet Thursday afternoon when I saw her again. No wedding dress, no polished makeup, no expensive handbag. Just my daughter, standing alone on my front porch. I knew she was there before she knocked. Somehow, a mother always knows. I opened the door slowly. For a moment, neither of us spoke. She looked thinner, tired. Her eyes were swollen, not from anger, from crying. "Hi, Mom." Not Margaret, not defensive, just Mom. I stepped aside. "Come in." She walked into the living room like a visitor, not like someone who grew up there. She didn't sit until I did. That told me everything. Power had shifted. For several minutes, the only sound was the ticking of the wall clock. Finally, she spoke. "I left him." The words hung in the air. I didn't react immediately. "Why?" I asked calmly. She swallowed. "The investigation, his accounts, the questions." She paused. I started asking questions too. I waited. "He admitted it." My heart didn't race this time. It didn't shatter. It just settled. "He said your money was inevitable, that once we secured conservatorship, it would all be simple." I closed my eyes briefly. Hearing it out loud still hurt, but it didn't shock me anymore. "I didn't know he was pushing the guardianship draft until after it was written," she whispered. "You signed it." Her eyes filled again. "I trusted him." I nodded slowly. "And I trusted you." The words weren't angry. They were honest. That's what made them heavier. She looked around the room, at the photographs, at the bookshelf, at the framed picture of her father. "I don't know how I became someone who could hurt you like that." There it was, the real question. Not about money, not about legal battles, about identity. I took a deep breath. "Manipulation doesn't begin with cruelty," I said quietly. "It begins with suggestion." She listened. "He didn't tell you to steal. He told you it was logical." She nodded. "He didn't tell you I was weak. He asked if I was slowing down." Tears rolled down her face. He reframed greed as planning. Silence filled the room. "And I let him," she whispered. Yes, she did. But here is something most people misunderstand about forgiveness. Forgiveness is not denial. It is clarity. "I can forgive you," I said slowly. Her head snapped up. "But forgiveness does not mean restoration." She didn't understand at first. "You removed me from your life when I was inconvenient. You prepared legal action against me. You transferred money without consent." Her breathing grew shallow. "I will not pretend that didn't happen." She nodded weakly. "I'm not asking for money," she said quickly. "I don't want anything." "I know. And I don't expect you to fix this." "Good, because some things cannot be fixed. They can only be redefined."
We talked for 2 hours about Jason, about red flags she ignored, about pressure, about the wedding. She admitted something that stayed with me. He said if you showed up, you might embarrass us, that you'd cry or make a scene. I almost smiled. I wasn't going to cry. I know that now. She looked at her hands. I think he needed you gone so no one would question the money. Of course he did. Isolation makes control easier. Before she left, she asked quietly, "Do you still love me?" The question broke something small inside me, because love had never been the problem. "I will always love you," I said. "That doesn't change." She exhaled shakily. "But I need time," I added, "and boundaries." She nodded. "Boundaries are fair." That was new. Understanding boundaries is growth. After she left, I sat alone on the sofa again, but this time the house didn't feel heavy. It felt peaceful, not because everything was perfect, but because everything was honest. A few weeks later, I received official confirmation. The investigation into the unauthorized transfer attempts was closed. Jason's business suffered, not because I sought revenge, but because truth has weight, and eventually it falls where it belongs. I did not reinstate my daughter as beneficiary, not out of punishment, but out of wisdom. Trust, once fractured, must rebuild slowly, through action, not apology. We now meet for coffee once a week, public places, neutral ground. We talk, carefully, respectfully. She is rebuilding her life, without shortcuts, without manipulation, and I am rebuilding mine, with clarity. Here's what I understand at 68 years old. Betrayal doesn't always come from hatred. Sometimes it comes from entitlement, from assumption, from believing access equals ownership. But here's what I also know. You are never too old to protect yourself. You are never too loving to set limits. And you are never obligated to surrender control to keep peace. So if you are over 50 and watching this, please hear me clearly. Do not confuse motherhood with vulnerability. Do not mistake trust for immunity. And do not wait until someone files paperwork to start protecting your life. Because sometimes the strongest act of love is saying no. And that is how the message that was meant to exclude me ended up teaching me how to stand alone without fear. If you are with me, like the video and subscribe to Grandma's Diaries.